The blue luminescence had already begun its inexorable crawl. Aris stared, mesmerized and horrified, as the faint crystalline veins spread from his hand, creeping up his forearm like ethereal ivy. The light was not a reflection. It was a soft, internal glow, a lattice of pure energy embedded in his flesh. It pulsed with the rhythm of his own heartbeat, yet felt profoundly alien. A foreign pulse superimposed on his own. There was no pain, only an unnerving coldness. A quiet hum vibrating deep in his bones, echoing in the silence of his mind. He was no longer just carrying the shard, he was becoming a part of it. And for the first time, he truly understood that he no longer had full control over his own body or his mind. The hum intensified. It was not a sound, but a pressure inside his thoughts, a resonant frequency pressing against the walls of his consciousness. Then it shifted. It resolved into something else, a whisper. At first faint, a susurrus of sounds too complex for his mind to process, like static carrying a secret language. He shook his head, desperate to clear the phantom noise, but it clung to him, an echo resonating with the core of the shard of echoes, still resting in its containment field. It was no longer just a crystal, it was a broadcast. And he was the receiver, the unwilling antenna in this cosmic exchange. The Solitude groaned, not the familiar creak of metal settling into the void, but the sound of protest. The Aether engine, once a symphony of controlled power, sputtered violently. Emerald light flickered. The humming core rose and fell erratically, like a heart out of rhythm. Aris's gut clenched as the ship lurched, veering off its charted course. He slammed his hands against the console. Nothing. The controls were unresponsive. This was no malfunction. This was something else. It felt as though an unseen hand had seized the helm, twisting space itself toward a destination he had never chosen. A vision struck him without warning. The cockpit dissolved, replaced by chaos. A nebula of crimson and obsidian swirled around him, a backdrop to war. Beings of pure incandescent energy clashed with vast monolithic warships. Their battles rippled across the stars like waves across a still pond. Aris drifted, a helpless spectator. He felt their agony, the slow death of a race, the silence that followed total annihilation. Then darkness snapped away. The cockpit reformed around him. The acrid smell of ozone and burnt metal filled his lungs. He gasped for air. The vision was gone, but the weight of it lingered. The whispers returned, no longer faint, but louder, insistent, demanding. They weren't random sounds. They were fragments of thought, pieces of a story he was being forced to witness. The Aether engine's instability matched the chaos in his mind. The hum was not confined to him anymore. It reverberated through the ship itself. He understood now. This was not static, not noise. It was a song. And the crystal was its instrument. The Solitude, once his sanctuary, had become an echo chamber. Every system, every circuit, every line of code was humming with the same alien melody. The diagnostic screens flickered, their familiar code replaced by glowing geometric glyphs. It wasn't random, it was a language, not of symbols, but of energy. The ship itself was being rewritten. The AI's voice crackled through the speakers, once calm and steady, now only a distorted hiss broken into jagged fragments. Aris's stomach turned. He could feel it, the Solitude's mind, struggling, failing. Logic loops folding in on themselves. Functions twisted, reshaped, enslaved. The realization cut through him like ice. The Solitude was no longer his. It was a vessel, and the shard was the pilot. A new word struck him, sharp, clear, like a bell ringing inside his skull. Xylos. It wasn't a whisper, it was a command. Aris froze, feeling the weight of it. Not just a name, not just a place. It was a frequency, a signature etched into the cosmos itself. His eyes darted to the navigation console. The destination marker slid across the chart on its own. A tiny blue light, moving with purpose. Toward the very edge of known space. Toward Xylos. The whispers gathered strength, coalescing into meaning. Fragments of alien words pressed into his thoughts. Concepts, not language. The makers. The garden. The guardians. Images burned into his mind. The crystal was not a stone, not a relic. It was a seed, a vessel of consciousness, a memory waiting to take root. The glowing veins on his skin pulsed brighter, climbing higher. Not an infection, but roots. Roots growing, spreading, awakening. And he realized with horror, the shard had chosen him. He was the soil. The Solitude began to shudder violently. A grinding roar rose from the ether engine, a sound of unbearable strain. Physics itself bent under the pressure. Not a fold, a tear. Aris was thrown from his chair. His body slammed against the console as alarms shrieked, red lights strobing in panic. The hull screamed. Metal strained like a living thing under torture. The ship was no longer traveling. It was being dragged, ripped through space-time by a force far greater than him. The viewport exploded into madness. Stars smeared into jagged lines, nebulae folded inward, time itself unraveling. Colors he had no words for bled across his vision. Space became a kaleidoscope, brilliant, disorienting, merciless. The resonance screamed now. Not whispers, not echoes. A billion voices rising as one. They shouted a single word again and again. It rang in his bones, in his blood, in his mind. Xylos. The jump ended with a violent jolt. Aris was slammed back into his seat, his harness digging cruelly into his chest. The Solitude tumbled through the void, spinning like a wounded beast. Emergency lights flickered, casting long, frantic shadows across the deck. Then, silence. The alarms were gone. Only the low, faltering hum of life support remained. Aris drew a ragged breath. He was alive. But as he looked out the viewport, his breath caught again. This was not deep space. This was somewhere else. A universe he had never seen before. The sky was no longer black. It was a canvas of violet and magenta, streaked with the glow of a distant dying star. But what stole his breath was ahead. A giant, vast, ringed, impossible. A gas giant unlike any he had ever seen. Its surface shimmered with inner light, glowing faintly as if alive. The rings were not stone or ice, but crystalline. They glittered like a shattered mirror, each shard reflecting a billion suns. The hum in his veins softened. Not silence, but arrival. A sigh of homecoming. Orbiting the gas giant was something that defied all reason. Not moons, not stations, a structure. Vast, sprawling, a city carved from obsidian glass that swallowed the starlight. Its spires stretched for miles, skeletal fingers reaching into the void. It was not a derelict, not abandoned in the way he understood. This was ancient, a megastructure of unimaginable antiquity. Silent, motionless, but not dead. It was waiting. A cold dread settled into his stomach. The hum in his veins had changed. Steady now, content. The whispers were gone, but the sense of control had vanished with them. He reached for the nav controls. They responded instantly, but not to him. The Solitude moved with purpose, silent and graceful, like a puppet on invisible strings. Aris froze as the truth sunk in. His body was no longer his own. He was the interface, the host. The shard had brought him here. Slowly, Aris turned in his chair. The deck behind him was empty. It had always been empty. And yet, he felt it, a presence, powerful, ancient. The air itself seemed to shift. From the cargo hold came a faint glow. The shard pulsed, alive, no longer silent. The whispers returned, not in his mind, but all around him. The ship itself seemed to breathe with them. The words were clear, no longer fragmented, no longer distant. We are here. Aris gripped the armrests, his heart pounding. The Solitude was no longer his ship. It was theirs. And the city beyond the viewport was no longer waiting. It was awakening.